The Arizona sun had finally surrendered to the horizon, painting the Sonoran Desert in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. Jackson "Jax" Harrison twisted the throttle of his 2018 Harley-Davidson Road King, feeling the familiar rumble beneath him as he cruised down State Route 60. The asphalt shimmered with residual heat from another brutal Phoenix summer day where temperatures had peaked at 109 degrees. Even at 9 in the evening, the air felt like standing too close to an oven. Jax's leather vest bore the patch of the Desert Riders Motorcycle Club, a brotherhood he'd been part of for 8 years. At 32, he'd seen his share of road miles, desert storms, and the kind of silence that only comes from riding alone under an endless sky. His tanned arms showed ink that told stories, a tribute to his younger brother Danny on his left forearm, coordinates of their last ride together on his right. 4 years had passed since Danny's accident on Highway 87, but some wounds never fully healed. They just became part of who you were. The meeting at the clubhouse had run late. Nothing urgent, just the usual brotherhood business. Planning the annual charity ride for veterans, discussing bike maintenance workshops for young riders, and sharing stories over cold beers. Jax had left around 8:30, eager to get back to his shop. Harrison's custom cycles didn't run itself, and he had a 72 Shovelhead waiting for a complete engine rebuild. The owner, an old-timer named Gerald Montgomery, had been patient, but Jax prided himself on meeting deadlines. As he approached the junction where Route 60 met Desert Valley Road, Jax noticed something unusual at the old Cactus Stop gas station. The place was a landmark for riders, a weathered building with faded red paint, 2 ancient pumps that somehow still worked, and a small convenience store that sold the coldest water for 50 miles. What caught his attention wasn't the station itself, but the car sitting alone in the far corner of the parking lot, hood raised, hazard lights blinking weakly in the growing darkness. Jax eased off the throttle and pulled into the lot, gravel crunching under his tires. His headlights swept across the scene, a beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, Arizona plates, and a young woman standing beside it with her arms crossed, staring at the engine like it might spontaneously fix itself through sheer willpower. She looked to be in her mid-20s, brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing a server's uniform from one of the roadside diners. Her white sneakers were dusty, and exhaustion lined her face. She glanced up as Jax's bike rumbled closer, and he saw the instinctive tension in her shoulders. He killed the engine, kicked down the stand, and removed his helmet slowly, deliberately. Years of riding had taught him that showing up unannounced, especially at night, required a certain approach. He kept his distance, didn't smile too wide, and made sure his body language said, "Here to help, not here to hassle." "Evening," Jax said, his voice carrying easily across the quiet parking lot. "Looks like you got some trouble." The woman studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes assessing. Jax understood. A lone woman, broken down car, middle of nowhere, and a biker pulling up. That equation could go wrong fast. But he also saw the calculation happening behind her gaze, weighing fear against need. "Won't start," she finally said, her voice cautious but steady. "Overheated about 2 miles back. I let it cool down, added water, but now it just clicks when I turn the key." Jax nodded, moving closer but keeping the car between them, giving her space. "Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Be my guest. I don't know much about engines." He approached the Honda and leaned over the engine compartment, immediately spotting multiple issues. The battery terminals were corroded, one of the belts was frayed nearly through, and the radiator was leaking from a cracked hose. This car had been running on borrowed time for a while. "When's the last time you had maintenance done?" Jax asked, straightening up. "I honestly can't remember. Maybe 6 months? I bought it used about a year ago." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, despite the lingering heat. "Is it bad?" Battery terminals are shot, and you've got a radiator hose that's giving up the ghost. The clicking is probably the starter solenoid not getting enough juice. Jax walked back to his bike and opened one of the hard saddlebags, pulling out a small toolkit he always carried. I can clean the terminals, might get it to turn over, but that hose needs replacing, and soon. I don't have money for a tow truck, she said quietly, almost to herself. Jax didn't respond to that, just got to work. He pulled out a wire brush and started scrubbing the corrosion from the battery terminals, the white and green buildup flaking off in chunks. The woman watched from a few feet away, silent. The desert night settled around them, bringing with it the sound of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. After 10 minutes of work, Jax tightened the terminals and straightened. Try it now. She slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Relief washed over her face so completely that Jax felt something tighten in his chest. He'd seen that look before, the face of someone barely holding it together, for whom one more broken thing might be the thing that broke them. "Thank you," she said, climbing out. "Really, I don't know what I would have done." "You're not out of the woods yet," Jax said, wiping his hands on a shop rag from his toolkit. "That hose is gonna blow, probably within the next few days. And these terminals are gonna corrode again fast in this heat. You need to get this to a mechanic." "I will," she said, though they both knew it was the kind of promise people made when they had no idea how to keep it. Jax studied her for a moment. Something about the situation didn't sit right. The worn-out car, the exhaustion, the way she carried herself, like someone trying very hard to be invisible. It reminded him of things he'd seen before, situations the desert riders had encountered when they did community outreach. Women running from bad situations, starting over with nothing but willpower and hope. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Phoenix. I work at the Sunrise Diner on Route 60 near Apache Junction." Jax knew the place. He'd stopped there a few times. Decent coffee, better pie, the kind of establishment where truckers and bikers were equally welcome. It was about 15 miles west from where they stood. "I'm gonna follow you," Jax said. It wasn't a question. "Make sure you get there okay. If that hose blows on the highway at night, you're gonna be in a bad spot." She started to protest, but he was already back on his bike, helmet on, engine rumbling to life. She got the message. This was happening whether she argued or not. After a moment, she nodded, climbed into her Honda, and pulled out of the parking lot. Jax followed at a safe distance, his headlight illuminating the Civic's rear bumper. The night stretched ahead of them, two vehicles cutting through the darkness of the Arizona desert, strangers bound by the unspoken code of the road. You didn't leave people stranded, not if you could help it. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of the Sunrise Diner. The place glowed like a beacon, neon signs advertising 24 hours and Best Pie in Arizona competing for attention. The woman parked near the back of the lot, in front of a small apartment building attached to the diner's rear. Employee housing, Jax figured. She got out of her car and walked over to where Jax had stopped his bike. Up close, under the parking lot lights, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 24 at most. Her name tag, slightly crooked on her uniform, read, Vanessa. "Thank you," Vanessa Coleman said again, "for helping me and for making sure I got home safe." Jax just nodded. "Get that car looked at. There's a good shop in Apache Junction, Miller's Auto Repair. Tell them Jax from Desert Riders sent you. They'll treat you fair." "I'll try," she said. Then, after a pause, "Why did you help me?" It was a question that carried weight, the kind that came from someone used to people wanting something in return. Jax met her eyes, kept his voice level. "Because your car was broken down, and I know how to fix it, that's all." Vanessa studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, thank you, Jax." He put his helmet back on, fired up the bike, and rode away without looking back. In his rear-view mirror, he saw her standing in the parking lot, watching him disappear into the night. Something about the image stayed with him as he headed home. A lone figure, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by desert darkness. What Jax didn't know was that someone else had been watching the entire exchange. Daniel Brooks, the 62-year-old owner of the Cactus Stop gas station, had been inside his office when Jax's bike pulled in. Daniel had seen a lot in his 30 years running that station, and even more during his 25 years as a Phoenix police officer before that. He recognized the signs. The broken-down car in the back of the lot where people thought they wouldn't be noticed. The young woman who paid for gas in small bills and bought day-old sandwiches. The way she avoided eye contact and never stayed inside the store longer than necessary. Daniel had started paying attention to Vanessa 3 weeks ago when she first appeared, asking if she could use the bathroom and buy some water. Since then, she'd stopped by half a dozen times, always during her breaks from the diner, always alone, always with that same haunted look around her eyes. Tonight, watching Jax work on her car and then escort her home, Daniel Brooks made a decision. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in 6 months. Margaret Preston, a social worker with the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They'd worked together on cases before, back when Daniel wore a badge. The call went to voicemail. "Margaret, it's Daniel Brooks. I've got a situation you should know about. Young woman, early 20s, showing classic signs. Working at the Sunrise Diner on Route 60. Call me back when you can." He hung up and looked out the window at the empty parking lot where Jax's bike had been minutes ago. The biker had done a good thing tonight, probably without realizing the bigger picture he'd just stepped into. Daniel had a feeling that good deed was going to ripple further than anyone expected. The desert night grew cooler, though cool in Phoenix summer terms still meant mid-80s. Somewhere in the distance, another motorcycle roared past on Route 60, the sound fading into the vast Arizona darkness. The Cactus Stop's neon sign buzzed and flickered, a lighthouse for travelers crossing an ocean of sand and stone. Inside his small apartment above the shop, Jax Harrison stripped off his vest and boots, catching his reflection in the mirror. 4 years since Danny died, and he still couldn't ride past certain stretches of highway without feeling that hollow ache. His brother had been 26, full of life and bad jokes, always the first to volunteer when someone needed help. "That's what we do, man," Danny used to say. "We look out for people, that's the code." Jax had carried that code ever since, even as he'd withdrawn from most personal connections. The desert riders were his family now, and the open road was his therapy. He didn't let people in easily anymore, didn't take chances on relationships that could end in loss. But helping someone whose car broke down, that wasn't personal. That was just doing what needed to be done. He fell asleep that night without giving Vanessa Coleman much more thought, having no idea that their paths would cross again, or that his simple act of kindness had been witnessed by eyes that understood far more than he did about the situation he'd stumbled into. 3 days passed before Jax saw Vanessa again. He'd been working late at Harrison's Custom Cycles, elbow deep in the shovelhead rebuild for Gerald Montgomery, when his stomach reminded him he'd skipped lunch. It was past 9 in the evening and most places were closed except for the chains and diners that stayed open for truckers and night owls. The Sunrise Diner wasn't his usual stop, but it was close, and he'd remembered their pie was decent. He told himself that was the only reason he was pulling into their parking lot, not because he was curious whether Vanessa had gotten her car fixed. The Honda was there, though, parked in the same spot near the employee housing. Hood closed this time. Inside, the diner had that timeless quality all such places shared. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floor, a counter with swivel stools, and the smell of coffee that had been on the burner too long mixed with fryer grease and pie. A handful of customers were scattered throughout, a truck driver working through a chicken-fried steak, an elderly couple sharing a slice of apple pie, two teenagers nursing sodas and whispering to each other. Vanessa was behind the counter, pouring coffee for a man in a construction vest. She glanced up as the door chimed, and Jax saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by something that might have been relief or wariness. He couldn't tell which. He slid onto a stool at the counter, not in her section, but close enough that she'd have to pass by. She finished with the construction worker and made her way over, order pad in hand. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice professionally neutral. "Please, and whatever pie you recommend." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "The cherries fresh, made this morning by Helen. She's been making pies here for 30 years. "I'll trust her expertise," Jax said. Vanessa nodded and headed to the pie case. Jax watched her move through the diner with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee, clearing tables, chatting briefly with the regulars. She was good at her job, he noticed. Attentive without being intrusive, friendly without being fake. But there was a tiredness to her movements, like she was running on fumes. She returned with a generous slice of cherry pie and a steaming mug of coffee. "Anything else?" "You get that car looked at?" Jax asked. Vanessa's smile faltered. "Not yet. But it's still running, so that's something." "It won't run for long with that radiator hose on borrowed time." "I know. I'm saving up." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, and moved away before he could respond. Jax ate his pie, which was in fact excellent, and watched the rhythm of the diner. A new customer came in, a woman in her mid-50s with graying hair pulled into a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She took a booth near the window, and Vanessa immediately went over, greeting her with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Margaret, your usual? Please, sweetheart. And how are you doing?" "Getting by," Vanessa replied, the standard answer people gave when they didn't want to explain how they were really doing. Jax couldn't hear the rest of their conversation, but he noticed the woman, Margaret, studying Vanessa with an intensity that went beyond casual interest. When Vanessa walked away, Margaret pulled out her phone and made a note of something. Jax paid his bill, left a generous tip, and headed out. As he straddled his bike, the diner door opened and Vanessa stepped out, carrying a bag of trash to the dumpster. She saw him and paused. "Look," she said, setting the trash bag down for a moment, "I really appreciate what you did the other night. But if you're expecting something in return..." "I'm not," Jax interrupted. "Just stopped for pie." She studied him, that same assessing look from their first meeting. "Okay. Sorry. I've learned to be careful." "Nothing wrong with careful," Jax said. He started his bike, then added, "But if you need help getting that car fixed, Desert Riders does community service days. We help folks who can't afford shop rates, no strings." He rode off before she could respond, leaving her standing in the parking lot with a bag of trash and a confused expression. What neither of them noticed was Daniel Brooks pulling into the gas station across the street, or the way he sat in his truck, watching the diner, making notes on his phone. He'd been tracking Vanessa's patterns for weeks now. When she worked, where she went on her breaks, who she talked to. It wasn't stalking, it was information gathering. After 30 years in law enforcement and community work, Daniel knew the difference. His phone rang. Margaret Preston. "Daniel, I just saw her at the diner." "You're right to be concerned. She's showing all the classic signs: isolation, hypervigilance, reluctance to talk about her past. I tried to engage her, but she's wary." "There's something else," Daniel said, watching Jax's taillights disappear down Route 60. "A biker's been helping her. Guy named Jax, member of the Desert Riders MC, helped fix her car a few nights ago. Just saw him at the diner. He seems legit, but I'm keeping an eye on it." Desert Riders. Margaret's voice carried a note of recognition. "They're good people. They've helped us before with safe transport for women leaving abusive situations. If he's involved, that might actually work in our favor. But we need to move carefully. If she's running from someone, we don't want to spook her or put her in danger. Agreed. I'll keep watching. Let me know if you make any progress. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his truck for another 10 minutes, watching the diner. Through the window, he could see Vanessa moving from table to table, refilling drinks, taking orders, smiling even though her eyes stayed sad. He'd seen that look before, on his daughter's face, years ago, when she'd been trapped in a marriage that was slowly destroying her. He'd failed to see it then, too caught up in his own life to notice, until it was almost too late. He wouldn't make that mistake again. The next week fell into an unexpected pattern. Jax found himself at the Sunrise Diner 3 more times, always with some excuse. The pie, the coffee, it was convenient. Each time, he left a larger tip than the meal warranted, folded carefully under the edge of his plate where only Vanessa would find it. She never mentioned it, and neither did he. On the 4th visit, he arrived to find Vanessa's car hood up again, steam rising from the engine. She was standing beside it in the parking lot, still in her uniform, looking like she might cry, but refusing to let herself. Jax pulled up beside her. "The hose." "Yeah," she said, her voice tight. "I was going to get it fixed this weekend, I swear. I had the money saved, but then my landlord raised the rent and—" She stopped herself. "Never mind, not your problem." "Pop the trunk," Jax said, dismounting. "What? Your trunk? Pop it. You've got a spare tire in there, probably some tools. I need to see what you've got." "Jax, I can't ask you to—" "You didn't ask. Pop the trunk." She did. Jax rummaged around and found a mostly empty gallon jug, a basic toolkit that looked like it had never been used, and some duct tape. Not ideal, but workable. "Stay here," he said, and rode across the street to the Cactus stop. Daniel Brooks was at the counter, and his eyebrows rose when Jax walked in. "Need a radiator hose for an 08 Honda Civic," Jax said. "And some hose clamps if you've got them." Daniel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Might have something in the back. For the girl across the street?" "Yeah." "You know her?" "Not really, just helping out." Daniel disappeared into his storage room and returned with a universal radiator hose and a pack of clamps. "This should work. $35. Jax pulled out his wallet, but Daniel waved him off. "Consider it my contribution to good deeds. But do me a favor, keep an eye on her. I think she might be in trouble, the kind that doesn't involve car problems." Jax met the older man's gaze and understood the weight behind it. "I'll keep my eyes open." Back at the diner, Jax spent the next 45 minutes replacing the radiator hose, while Vanessa sat on the curb watching, having clocked out for the night. They didn't talk much. Jax worked and she sat, and the Arizona night settled around them with its familiar heat and cricket song. When he finished, he closed the hood and wiped his hands. "That'll hold, but this car's got other issues. The whole cooling system's borderline. You need to take it to a real shop soon." "I know," Vanessa said quietly, "and I will. Things are tight right now." Jax nodded. He understood tight. After Danny died, he'd spent 6 months barely keeping his shop afloat while he drowned in grief and medical bills from the accident. The Desert Riders had carried him through that, brothers showing up to work for free, covering his bills, making sure he ate and slept. That was what brotherhood meant. "Desert Riders are doing a community service day next Saturday," he said. "At my shop. We do free repairs for people who need them. Bring your car. We'll go through it, fix what we can." "Jax, I can't." "Yeah, you can. That's what we do." He swung his leg over his bike. 9 a.m. Harrison's Custom Cycles, just off Route 60 near Superstition Springs. "Don't make me come looking for you." He rode away before she could argue, leaving her standing in the parking lot with an expression somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. From his truck across the street, Daniel Brooks watched the interaction and made another note on his phone. Then he called Margaret Preston. The biker's getting more involved. Just fixed her car again. Invited her to something at his shop next Saturday. That could be good, Margaret said thoughtfully, or complicated. We still don't know her full story. I'm going to try talking to her again tomorrow. But Daniel, if she's running from someone and that someone finds out she's getting help from a motorcycle club, it could escalate things. I know, but what's the alternative? We can't force her to accept help, and we can't protect her if we don't know what we're protecting her from. Keep watching. I'll make contact tomorrow. And Daniel, thank you for caring about this. It's what we do, he said, echoing words he'd heard Jack say to Vanessa. That night, Vanessa Coleman sat in her small studio apartment above the diner, staring at a burner phone she kept hidden in her sock drawer. She hadn't turned it on in 3 weeks, terrified of what messages might be waiting. Her old life in Flagstaff felt simultaneously like yesterday and a lifetime ago. The apartment she'd fled in the middle of the night, the job she'd abandoned, the man she'd loved until love turned into fear. Trevor Sutton had seemed perfect at first. Charming, attentive, successful, the red flags had been easy to miss or excuse, the way he needed to know where she was all the time, the jealousy disguised as caring, the gradual isolation from her friends and family. By the time she realized she was trapped, leaving seemed impossible. He controlled the money, knew all her passwords, had convinced her she was worthless without him. The final straw had come 3 months ago when he'd put his hands around her throat during an argument about her wanting to visit her sister. She'd seen her death in his eyes that night, and something in her had finally broken free from the fear. She'd waited until he left for a business trip, packed a single bag, withdrew the small emergency fund she'd been secretly building, and driven south through the night. Phoenix was big enough to disappear in, far enough from Flagstaff to feel safe. She'd found the job at the Sunrise Diner, rented the tiny apartment, and tried to become invisible. She didn't make friends, didn't share her real story, didn't stay anywhere long enough to form connections. The car breaking down had been terrifying. Each unexpected expense was a threat to the precarious stability she'd built. And then Jax had appeared. This quiet biker who helped without asking questions, who looked at her like she was a person instead of a problem or a possession. It scared her how much she wanted to trust him, how tempted she was to show up at his shop on Saturday. Trust was the thing that had nearly destroyed her before, but she was so tired of being alone. Vanessa turned off the lights and lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the diner below, dishes clattering, voices calling orders, the perpetual rhythm of a place that never slept. Through her window, she could see the glow of the cactus stop across the street, and if she looked carefully, Daniel Brooks's truck still parked in the lot. She didn't know he was watching over her, didn't know Margaret Preston was building a case file, didn't know that Jax Harrison had already decided in his quiet way that he wasn't going to let her fall through the cracks. All she knew was that for the first time in months, she felt something that might, possibly, be the beginnings of hope. And that was dangerous. Hope was the thing that kept you alive, but it was also the thing that could get you killed if you placed it in the wrong hands. Saturday was 5 days away. She'd decide by then whether to trust it. Saturday morning arrived with Phoenix's usual summer intensity. Even at 9 a.m., the temperature was climbing toward triple digits. Harrison's custom cycles occupied a large corner lot near Superstition Springs, a sprawling complex that included Jax's shop, a smaller retail space where he sold parts and accessories, and a garage bay large enough to accommodate 4 bikes comfortably. Behind the main building sat a large tent setup, tables loaded with food, and a handful of desert riders already gathered, their motorcycles lined up like metal cavalry. Jax had been there since 7, setting up tool stations and organizing parts. Community service days were something the Desert Riders did quarterly, a tradition started by the club's founder, Raymond "Preacher" Walsh, who believed that earning respect in the community meant serving it. Today, they'd work on bikes and cars for anyone who needed help, charging nothing but accepting donations to the local veterans' shelter. By 8:30, a line of vehicles had formed, an elderly man with a sputtering Yamaha cruiser, a young mother whose minivan needed brake work, a veteran with a Suzuki that hadn't run in 2 years. The Desert Riders moved among them like a well-oiled machine, assessing problems, organizing repairs, keeping spirits high with jokes and stories. Jax was helping Cameron Fletcher, one of his fellow riders, diagnose an electrical issue on a Kawasaki when he heard the familiar sound of a struggling engine. Vanessa's Honda Civic limped into the lot, and she emerged looking uncertain and out of place among the leather vests and motorcycles. "You came," Jax said, walking over. "I almost didn't," Vanessa admitted. "This is a lot." "It's just guys who like fixing things," Jax said. "Come on, I'll introduce you." He led her to the main garage, where 3 other Desert Riders were working. Cameron Fletcher, a firefighter in his day job, was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with an easy laugh. Next to him worked Andre Williams, 35, a software engineer who looked nothing like the stereotype, covered in tattoos, dreadlocks pulled back, grease under his fingernails. The third was Raymond "Preacher" Walsh himself, 68 years old, white beard reaching his chest, eyes that had seen everything and judged little. "Gentlemen, this is Vanessa Coleman. Her Civic needs some love." Preacher looked up from the carburetor he was cleaning and nodded. "Ma'am, let's see what we're working with." For the next hour, Vanessa watched as the Desert Riders systematically went through her car. They found and fixed the corroded battery terminals Jax had cleaned weeks ago, replaced worn brake pads, changed the oil that was thousands of miles overdue, patched a slow leak in one tire, and addressed a dozen small issues that had accumulated. They worked with a comfortable efficiency, passing tools without asking, moving around each other like dancers who knew the choreography. "You've been running this car hard with no maintenance," Cameron observed, not judgmentally but as simple fact. "When's the last time you had a full service?" "Before I bought it, maybe. I got it from a lot in Flagstaff about a year ago." The mention of Flagstaff made Jax glance up. Flagstaff was 2 hours north, different climate, different world. What brought someone from the pine forests to the desert? "Well, she's in better shape now," Andre said, closing the hood. "Still not perfect, but safer. You should be good for a while if you stay on top of oil changes." "How much do I owe you?" Vanessa asked, reaching for her purse. "Nothing," Preacher said. "That's not how this works, but if you want to throw something in the donation jar for the veterans' shelter, we won't stop you." Vanessa pulled out $40, probably more than she could afford, Jax thought, and stuffed it in the jar. "Thank you, all of you. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep yourself safe," Preacher replied, his eyes kind but knowing. "And if you ever need help with anything, and I mean anything, not just car trouble, you call Jax. Desert Riders look out for people who need it." Something passed between the old man and Vanessa, an understanding that went deeper than the words. She nodded slowly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work. They fixed 9 vehicles total, shared lunch under the tent, burgers and hot dogs grilled by Cameron, who took his cooking as seriously as his firefighting, and swapped stories. Vanessa stayed, helping serve food, cleaning up, watching the easy camaraderie of the club. Jax noticed her watching him particularly, those assessing eyes taking in how he interacted with his brothers, how they ribbed each other but had each other's backs, how even when they disagreed about the best way to fix something, there was respect in the debate. As the afternoon wound down and the last vehicle pulled away, Vanessa approached Jax while he was cleaning tools. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." Why do you do this? The community service, helping strangers, what do you get out of it? Jax was quiet for a moment, organizing wrenches by size. My brother Danny died 4 years ago. Motorcycle accident on Highway 87. He was 26, had his whole life ahead of him. He set down the wrench he was holding. After it happened, I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want help, just wanted to work and ride and pretend the world didn't exist. But the club wouldn't let me disappear. They showed up every day, whether I wanted them to or not. They kept my business running when I couldn't function. They made sure I ate, slept, didn't do anything stupid. He looked at Vanessa directly. They saved my life by not giving up on me. So when Preacher says we look out for people who need it, that's not charity. That's paying forward what was given to me. That's brotherhood. Vanessa's eyes glistened. I'm sorry about your brother. Me too. Jax returned to his tools. But he'd like knowing that his death reminded me what matters, taking care of each other, not leaving people stranded. Is that why you helped me? Because of him? I helped you because your car was broken and I knew how to fix it, Jax said. Same reason I'd help anyone. Danny just made sure I understood that helping people isn't optional. It's what you do. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then, I left Flagstaff 3 months ago. In the middle of the night. I had a boyfriend, Trevor Sutton, who wasn't good to me. It got bad enough that I had to run. I don't talk about it because I'm afraid he'll find me. The garage went silent. Jack set down his tools completely and gave her his full attention. Across the bay, he saw Preacher pause in his work, listening without appearing to. Does he know you're in Phoenix? Jax asked carefully. I don't think so. I left my phone, changed my social media, use cash when I can. But I'm scared all the time that I'll see him or that someone will tell him where I am. Does he have reason to come looking? Vanessa's laugh was bitter. Trevor doesn't like losing control of his things, and that's what I was to him, a thing he owned. So yeah, if he knew where I was, he'd come. Jax felt a familiar anger rising, the kind that had gotten him into trouble in his younger years before the desert riders taught him to channel it productively. You file a police report? In Flagstaff, yeah. Restraining order too, but he's charming, successful, knows people. I didn't think it would stop him, so I ran instead. Preacher walked over, his presence calm and solid. Vanessa, I'm going to give you my number and Jax's and the number for the clubhouse. If you ever feel unsafe, if you see something that worries you, if this Trevor shows up, if you just need someone to talk to, you call. Day or night. Desert riders have dealt with situations like this before. We know people who can help. I don't want to be a burden, Vanessa whispered. You're not. You're a young woman trying to survive, and you asked for help. That takes courage. Preacher pulled out his phone. What's your number? She gave it to him, and within moments both Preacher's and Jax's contact information was in her phone. Thank you, she said, the words inadequate for what she was feeling. One more thing, Jax said. Where are you parked at night? At the diner. Behind it. There's employee housing, just a small apartment. How visible is your car? Pretty visible from the road. Jax and Preacher exchanged a glance. Might want to park it somewhere less obvious, Preacher suggested. Maybe ask your boss if you can use a spot behind the building, out of direct line of sight. You think he's looking for me? I think being careful costs nothing, Jax said. And if he is looking, a distinctive car in a visible location makes you easier to find. The conversation shifted then, becoming practical. Preacher knew a social worker named Margaret Preston, who specialized in domestic violence cases. Jax suggested changing her license plates if possible, getting new ones from the DMV with a different registration address. Cameron, who'd been listening from across the garage, mentioned that his sister-in-law worked for a non-profit that helped women in Vanessa's situation with legal support and safe housing if needed. By the time Vanessa left that evening, She had a network she hadn't arrived with, phone numbers, resources, and most importantly, people who knew her situation and were watching out for her. After she drove away, the desert riders gathered to clean up the day's work. Cameron was the first to speak. "That girl's in deep trouble." "Yeah," Jax agreed. "You getting involved in this?" Andre asked, not judgmentally but assessing. "Already involved," Jax replied. Preacher nodded. "Then we're all involved. That's how this works. But Jax, be smart about it. If this Trevor character is dangerous, we need to be prepared. I'll reach out to some contacts, see what we can find out about him." "I'll talk to Margaret Preston," Cameron added. "She should know there's someone local keeping an eye on things. And I'll make sure the guys know to watch for anything unusual around the diner," Andre said. "I ride past there twice a day on my commute. Won't hurt to pay closer attention." Jax felt the familiar warmth of brotherhood settling around him. This was what the Desert Riders meant. When one person took on a problem, the whole club backed them up. It was the code, the unspoken law, that bound them together stronger than any contract. "Appreciate it," Jax said simply. That night, across town, Daniel Brooks sat in his living room with Margaret Preston, sharing coffee and information. Margaret had finally made real contact with Vanessa earlier that week, confirming what Daniel had suspected. She was fleeing domestic violence, hiding in plain sight, terrified of being found. "The biker club's getting involved," Daniel said. "I saw her at their shop today. They worked on her car, gave her their contact information." "Desert Riders," Margaret confirmed. "I know them. Good people. They've helped transport women to safe houses before, provided security when needed. If Jax Harrison's taken an interest, Vanessa's got strong allies. Question is, does she need them? Has this Trevor Sutton actually been looking for her, or is she safe and just doesn't know it?" Margaret pulled out her tablet and showed Daniel a file. "I made some calls. Trevor Sutton, 34, lives in Flagstaff, works as a financial advisor for a large firm. No criminal record except the restraining order Vanessa filed, which he violated twice, showed up at her workplace, sent messages through her friends. The Flagstaff PD documented it, but didn't arrest him because he's got a lawyer who's very good at making things go away. So he's dangerous and connected and obsessive." According to the notes from Vanessa's intake interview with the Flagstaff advocate, he told her explicitly that if she ever left him, he'd find her. That's a credible threat. Daniel set down his coffee. "So what's our move?" "We keep watching. I'll work on getting Vanessa into a more permanent safe housing situation, somewhere with better security than an apartment behind a diner. The Desert Riders can provide backup support. And you," Margaret looked at him seriously, "you keep doing what you're doing. Eyes on the situation, early warning if anything looks wrong." "I can do that." After Margaret left, Daniel sat alone with his thoughts. His daughter Melissa had escaped her abusive marriage 10 years ago, but the scars remained. He'd failed to see the signs until it was almost too late, too caught up in respecting her privacy to notice she was drowning. When she'd finally broken down and told him everything, the guilt had nearly crushed him. He couldn't save everyone, but he could save this one young woman if he stayed vigilant. At the Sunrise Diner, Vanessa finished her shift and climbed the stairs to her apartment, her phone feeling heavy in her pocket with all its new contacts. For 3 months, she'd been alone, deliberately isolated, trusting no one. Now, suddenly, she had people watching out for her: Jax, Preacher, Daniel Brooks, who she'd noticed watching from across the street. Margaret Preston, who'd been so kind. It should have felt safer. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because having people who cared meant having people who could be hurt if Trevor found her. It meant connections that could be traced, patterns that could be followed. But it also meant she wasn't facing the darkness alone anymore. Vanessa pulled out her burner phone, the one she'd brought from Flagstaff, and turned it on for the first time in weeks. 17 missed calls, all from Trevor's number, 12 text messages, progressing from angry to pleading to threatening. The last one, from 2 days ago, made her blood run cold. "I know you're somewhere in Phoenix. You can't hide forever, Vanessa. Come home before this gets worse." Her hands shook as she turned off the phone. He was looking for her. He knew she was in Phoenix. The question was, how much more did he know? And how long did she have before he found the Sunrise Diner? She looked at her phone's contact list, at Jax's name and number sitting there like a lifeline. She wanted to call, wanted to tell someone about the messages, but it was late and she'd already asked for so much help. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd tell Jax about the messages. Tomorrow she'd figure out her next move. She didn't know that across the street, Daniel Brooks was sitting in his truck, watching her apartment window, or that Jax Harrison was lying awake in his own bed, thinking about a young woman with scared eyes and wondering what kind of monster she was running from. The desert night held its breath, waiting for the storm it knew was coming. Trevor Sutton stood in the parking lot of a generic Phoenix hotel, staring at his phone and fighting the urge to throw it across the asphalt. 3 months of searching, hundreds of dollars in private investigator fees, and countless hours scrolling through social media and security footage. And he'd finally narrowed Vanessa's location to Phoenix. But Phoenix was a massive sprawl of 5 million people, and she'd gone completely dark. No social media activity, no credit card usage he could track, no contact with her family or old friends. She disappeared like smoke, and it was driving him insane. Trevor considered himself a patient man, a quality that had served him well in his financial career. He built client relationships over years, played the long game with investments, never rushed decisions. But with Vanessa, patience was wearing thin. She was his, had been his for 2 years, and her running away was unacceptable. It showed disrespect, defiance, a fundamental misunderstanding of how their relationship worked. He'd tried being reasonable. He'd called, texted, even sent messages through her sister Claire, who'd blocked him after delivering one message. "She never wants to see you again. Stop looking." Claire had always been a problem, poisoning Vanessa against him with her feminist nonsense about boundaries and independence. The restraining order was a joke, a piece of paper that meant nothing. His lawyer had already made 2 violations disappear with strategic donations to the Flagstaff Police Benevolent Fund and a compelling argument about misunderstandings. Money and connections went far, and Trevor had both. His phone rang. Frank Morrison, the private investigator he'd hired. "I've got something," Frank said without preamble. Facial recognition hit from a gas station camera on Route 60, about 20 miles east of Phoenix. Woman matching Vanessa's description, timestamp from 3 weeks ago. She was in a server uniform. Trevor's pulse quickened. "Which gas station?" "Place called the Cactus Stop. I'm sending you the coordinates. But here's the interesting part. There are several diners and restaurants within a 5-mile radius. If she was in uniform, she's working at one of them. Send me the list." Already did. 6 possibilities. The Cactus Stop owner wouldn't talk to me, but I'm guessing he knows something. These small businesses, they're all connected. "I'll handle it from here," Trevor said. "Send your final invoice." After hanging up, Trevor studied the list of restaurants. 6 options. He'd visit each one, show Vanessa's photo, ask careful questions. He'd be charming, concerned, the worried boyfriend looking for his missing girlfriend. People ate that story up. He'd find her. And when he did, they'd have a long conversation about respect and consequences and coming home where she belonged. Across town, Jax was in the middle of a carburetor rebuild when his phone rang. "Preacher, we've got a problem. Friend of mine in Flagstaff PD just called. Says Trevor Sutton's been making noise up there, asking around about Vanessa's whereabouts. Hired a private investigator, the works. My guy thinks he might have a lead, pointing to Phoenix." Jack set down his tools. "How solid?" "Solid enough that we should warn Vanessa." If he's coming to Phoenix, she needs to be ready to move if necessary. I'll talk to her. She's working lunch shift at the diner today. Jax, be careful. If this guy's as obsessed as the reports suggest, he's not going to take kindly to another man in the picture. I'm not in the picture. I'm just helping. You think he'll see the distinction? Jax didn't answer because they both knew the answer. Instead, he said, I'll be careful. And preacher, might want to let the guys know to be on alert. Already done. Stay safe, brother. Jax arrived at the Sunrise Diner just after 1 p.m., the lunch rush winding down. Vanessa was clearing tables, and her face brightened when she saw him before worry took over. Is something wrong? Need to talk to you, privately. They stepped out to the parking lot, finding shade beside the building. Jax laid it out straight. Preacher's contact in Flagstaff, Trevor hiring an investigator, the strong possibility he was closing in on Phoenix. Vanessa's face went pale. I got messages from him 2 nights ago, on my old phone, the burner I brought from Flagstaff. He said he knew I was in Phoenix. Why didn't you call me? Jax asked, trying to keep frustration out of his voice. Because I didn't want to be a burden. You've already done so much, Vanessa. He waited until she met his eyes. You're not a burden, but I can't help if I don't know what's happening. What else did the messages say? She pulled out the burner phone and showed him. Jax read through Trevor's messages, his jaw tightening with each one. The progression from anger to false sweetness to veiled threats painted a clear picture of an abuser losing control. You need to get rid of this phone. Today. He might be tracking it. I haven't had it on, except to check messages. Doesn't matter. Modern phones can be pinged even when off, if someone knows what they're doing. Jax's mind was racing through options. Here's what we're going to do. First, destroy that phone. Second, I'm calling Margaret Preston. She can help arrange safer housing. Third, you're not staying in that apartment tonight. Where am I supposed to go? Clubhouse. Desert Riders have a spare room for situations exactly like this. It's secure, multiple people around, cameras on the property. Jax, I can't just... Yes, you can. His voice was firm but not unkind. Vanessa, listen to me. This guy hired a PI. He's got resources, determination, and from these messages he's escalating. The apartment behind the diner is the first place he'll look once he finds out you work here. You need to be somewhere he can't access. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm so tired of running. I know. But sometimes running keeps you alive long enough to figure out how to stand and fight. Across the street, Daniel Brooks watched the interaction from his gas station office, phone already in hand calling Margaret Preston. He'd seen Jax arrive with unusual urgency, seen the serious conversation, and his cop instincts were screaming that something had shifted. Margaret answered on the second ring. Daniel? Something's happening at the diner. The biker just showed up. Looks serious. I think the threat level just increased. I'm on my way. Keep eyes on the situation. 20 minutes later, a small crisis team had assembled in the diner's back office. Jax, Vanessa, Margaret Preston, and Helen Martinez, the 60-year-old owner of the Sunrise Diner, who'd been told enough to understand one of her employees needed help. Margaret laid out the options with professional calm. We can get you into a women's shelter tonight, completely confidential location. Or the Desert Riders Clubhouse, as Jax suggested. Both are viable short-term solutions. Long-term, we need to document everything, possibly file an updated restraining order here in Maricopa County, and consider whether you want to press charges for the violation of the Flagstaff order. Will any of that actually stop him? Vanessa asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. Here's what I know, Margaret said carefully. Restraining orders work when the person respects legal consequences. Trevor Sutton has shown he doesn't. The shelter can keep you safe, but you'd have to quit your job, sever contacts, essentially start over again. The clubhouse is less restrictive, but also less anonymous. What do you recommend? Vanessa looked at each person in turn. Jax spoke first. "Clubhouse tonight at minimum. Gives us time to think and plan without you being in immediate danger. The diner apartment is compromised. If Trevor finds this place, that's the first spot he'll watch." Helen nodded. "I'll tell the staff you had a family emergency, had to leave town for a while. If anyone comes asking, we haven't seen you in days." "I'll coordinate with Flagstaff PD," Margaret added, "and alert Phoenix PD that there's a potential stalking situation. It won't give us much protection, but it creates a paper trail." Vanessa looked down at her hands, at the burner phone sitting on the desk like a live grenade. Then she made her decision. "Okay, Clubhouse tonight. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not hiding forever. I came to Phoenix to start over, to build a life. I won't let Trevor take that from me again." "We're not asking you to hide forever," Jax said. "Just long enough to get ahead of this. To make a plan instead of just reacting." Daniel Brooks appeared in the doorway, his weathered face serious. "Hate to interrupt, but you should all see this." He held up his phone, showing security camera footage from the cactus stop. A man in his mid-30s, well-dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, was standing at the counter, showing something on his phone to Daniel's employee. The timestamp read 40 minutes ago. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. "That's him. That's Trevor." The room went cold. "He showed a photo, asked if we'd seen a woman matching the description," Daniel explained. "My guy said no, like I'd instructed all my employees. But Vanessa, he's here. He's in the area asking questions." Margaret Preston shifted into crisis mode. "We move now. Vanessa, go to your apartment, pack essentials only, 5 minutes maximum. Jax, go with her, keep watch. Daniel, pull all your security footage from the last month and save it. Helen, lock down staff communications. Nobody talks to anyone they don't know." The group dispersed with military efficiency. Jax accompanied Vanessa to her apartment, standing guard while she threw clothes, documents, and essentials into a duffel bag. Her hands shook as she packed, adrenaline and fear making her clumsy. "Why won't he just let me go?" she whispered. "Because men like him don't see women as people," Jax replied, his voice hard. "They see property, and he thinks you're his." "I was so stupid to ever believe he loved me." "You weren't stupid. He was a good liar. That's not the same thing." Jax checked his watch. 4 minutes. Grab anything irreplaceable, and let's move." Vanessa took one last look at the small apartment that had been her sanctuary for 3 months, then followed Jax down the stairs. His motorcycle sat waiting, and she realized she'd never ridden on one before. "Hold on tight, lean when I lean, don't fight the movement," Jax instructed, handing her a helmet. "It's 15 minutes to the clubhouse." The ride through Phoenix in the afternoon heat was surreal, the city streaming past in a blur of strip malls and desert landscape, the throb of the Harley's engine drowning out thought. Her arms wrapped around Jax's waist as they navigated traffic on Route 60. For those 15 minutes, Vanessa felt simultaneously terrified and oddly free. The Desert Riders Clubhouse sat on 3 acres just outside Mesa, a compound that included the main building, a large garage, a fire pit area, and several security features that weren't immediately obvious. Jax pulled through the gate, which closed behind them with a solid clank. Inside, Preacher was waiting along with Cameron and Andre. They'd already prepared the spare room and had begun implementing security protocols, cameras monitored, members alerted, a rotating watch schedule established. "You're safe here," Preacher told Vanessa, his calm presence radiating reassurance. "Nobody gets through that gate without us knowing. And if this Trevor shows up, he'll find 20 bikers between him and you." That night, while Vanessa tried to rest in the clubhouse's spare room, the Desert Riders gathered around the fire pit to discuss strategy. The Arizona night had finally cooled to a bearable temperature, and the flames cast flickering shadows across weathered faces. "We can't just wait for him to make a move," Cameron argued. "If he's already in the area asking questions, it's only a matter of time before he finds the diner. And when he does, he'll find she's gone. Andre countered. That might be enough to make him give up and go home. You believe that? Jax asked. Andre shook his head. No, but I'm trying to be optimistic. Preacher studied the fire. I've seen this before. Men like Trevor Sutton don't give up. They escalate. Right now he's playing detective, being smart. When that doesn't work fast enough, he'll get angry. That's when he becomes dangerous, not just to Vanessa, but to anyone he perceives as helping her. The implication hung in the air. By protecting Vanessa, the Desert Riders had made themselves targets. So, we're committed, Jax said. It wasn't a question. We're committed, Preacher confirmed. The code says we protect people who need protecting. That's what we do. The other men nodded. This was what brotherhood meant, standing together even when it brought trouble to your doorstep. I'll reach out to some contacts in Flagstaff, Cameron said. Get more background on this guy. Know your enemy and all that. I'll work the legal angle with Margaret, Preacher added. See if we can get Phoenix PD to take the threat seriously before something happens. And I'll keep Vanessa safe, Jax said quietly. The others looked at him, reading something in his tone that went beyond simple protection. You getting attached, brother? Andre asked carefully. Jax was silent for a long moment. I'm doing what's right. That's all. But later, lying in his own room in the clubhouse, Jax admitted to himself that it was more complicated than that. Somewhere between fixing Vanessa's car and watching her struggle to rebuild a life, she'd become more than just someone who needed help. She'd become someone he cared about. Someone whose smile made the day feel less heavy. Someone who reminded him that there were reasons to let people in again. It was dangerous, those feelings. Danny's death had taught him that caring about people meant risking devastating loss. For 4 years, he'd kept everyone at arm's length, maintained emotional distance even with his brothers in the club. Vanessa was slipping past those defenses, and it scared him almost as much as Trevor Sutton did. 3 rooms away, Vanessa lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the clubhouse. Somewhere outside, someone was working on a motorcycle. Voices drifted through the walls, low and calm. For the first time in months, she felt something other than alone. But with that feeling came guilt. These men were putting themselves at risk for her. Jax especially. Quiet, guarded Jax, who'd helped without asking for anything in return, who'd somehow become the first person she'd trusted since fleeing Flagstaff. She thought about him on the motorcycle ride, the solid strength of him, the careful way he'd explained how to ride safely. She thought about his hands fixing her car, covered in grease but precise and capable. She thought about the way he'd looked at her in the diner parking lot when she'd admitted she was tired of running, like he understood exactly what that exhaustion felt like. Vanessa had sworn off men after Trevor, had promised herself that relationships only led to pain and control and loss of self. But Jax wasn't Trevor. He didn't demand or manipulate or cage. He offered help and stepped back, gave options instead of orders, looked at her like she was a person with agency instead of a possession to be managed. It was confusing and frightening, and despite everything, the smallest bit hopeful. Trevor Sutton spent 3 days canvassing every diner, restaurant and truck stop within a 10-mile radius of the Cactus stop. He showed Vanessa's photo, spun his story about the worried boyfriend, made himself charming and sympathetic. Most people were helpful, but couldn't help. They hadn't seen her. A few were suspicious, giving him the kind of looks that said they'd dealt with his type before. On the 4th day, he hit the Sunrise Diner. Helen Martinez took one look at the well-dressed man with the too bright smile and knew exactly who he was. 40 years of managing diners had given her a 6th sense for trouble, and this man radiated it beneath his polished exterior. "Help you?" she asked, voice professionally neutral. "I hope so. I'm looking for my girlfriend. She ran away a few months ago, family emergency, mental health crisis. We're all very worried." He showed the photo on his phone. "Her name's Vanessa Coleman." I was told she might be working in this area. Helen studied the photo, then Trevor. Sorry, haven't seen her. We get a lot of folks passing through, but nobody by that name works here. Are you sure? Maybe she's using a different name? She's about 5'6", brown hair, mid-20s. I know my employees. She's not one of them. Helen's voice had gone cold. If you're not ordering food, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. We're busy. The diner was nearly empty, and they both knew it. Trevor's smile tightened. I'm just trying to find someone I love. Surely you can understand that. What I understand is that a woman who runs away in the middle of the night usually has good reason. And men who hire private investigators to track them down usually aren't looking to have a reasonable conversation. Helen crossed her arms. Leave, now, or I'm calling the police. Trevor's mask slipped for just a moment, showing the anger beneath. Then he smoothed it back into place, pulled out a business card, and set it on the counter. If you see her, or if any of your employees know anything, I'd appreciate a call. There's $500 in it for information. He left, but Helen noticed he sat in his rental car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching the diner, taking photos with his phone. She called Margaret Preston immediately. He was here, asking about Vanessa. I stonewalled him, but he knows this is the right area. He's not giving up. Margaret relayed the information to Jax within minutes. That evening, the Desert Riders held a full club meeting. 23 members gathered in the clubhouse, all briefed on the situation. This Trevor Sutton is escalating, Preacher told the assembly. He's in the area, he's persistent, and he's got resources. We need to decide as a club how we're handling this. What's to decide? Asked Tommy Chen, a member in his late 20s who worked as an EMT. We protect her. That's the code. It's more complicated than that, Cameron interjected. This isn't just giving someone a ride or fixing a car. This is potentially putting ourselves between an obsessed man and what he considers his property. That could get dangerous. So we let her fend for herself? Andre's voice carried an edge. That's not who we are. The debate continued, voices rising and falling, until Preacher raised his hand for silence. Vote. All in favor of extending full club protection to Vanessa Coleman until the threat is resolved. 23 hands went up, unanimous. Then it settled. From this moment, Vanessa is under Desert Riders' protection. We operate in shifts. Someone's always with her, someone's always watching her old location, and we all keep eyes open for Trevor Sutton. Cameron, coordinate with Margaret on the legal front. Andre, you're our tech guy. See if you can find out more about Sutton's movements, where he's staying, what he's doing. Jax. Preacher looked at him significantly. Your point on this. She trusts you. Make sure she stays safe and stays smart. After the meeting, Jax found Vanessa in the clubhouse kitchen, making coffee with hands that still trembled slightly. She'd been at the compound for 4 days now, and the confinement was starting to wear on her. He found the diner, Jax said. No point in softening it. Vanessa closed her eyes. Did he hurt anyone? No. Helen shut him down hard. But he knows you were there. Knows he's close. He's not leaving Phoenix until he finds you. Then I should leave Phoenix. Go somewhere else. Start over again. You could, Jax acknowledged. Or you could stop running. Vanessa turned to face him. And do what? Trevor has money, connections, patience. I have a duffel bag and a broken car. You have 23 bikers who just voted unanimously to protect you. You have Margaret Preston working the legal system. You have Daniel Brooks watching your back. You have me. Jax stepped closer. Vanessa, running keeps you alive, but it doesn't let you live. At some point you have to stand. I'm not brave like you. I'm not brave. I'm terrified most of the time. Terrified of caring about people because they might leave or die. Terrified of letting anyone see who I really am. Terrified of screwing up and failing the people who need me. He met her eyes. But I learned something from my brother's death. Being scared doesn't matter. Acting despite being scared, that's what matters. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then, what are you suggesting? Let Margaret file charges for the restraining order violations. Let Phoenix PD know he's here harassing you. Create a legal paper trail. Meanwhile, we draw him out, make contact, tell him you're done hiding, that if he wants to talk, it happens in public with witnesses. Take away his power by refusing to be afraid. That's insane. Probably. But it's better than spending your whole life looking over your shoulder. Over the next week, Margaret Preston worked legal magic. She filed documentation with Phoenix PD, got the Flagstaff restraining order extended to Maricopa County, and compiled evidence of Trevor's violations: photos, messages, witness statements. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough to get law enforcement's attention. Meanwhile, the Desert Riders maintained their watch. Tommy Chen rode past the Sunrise Diner twice daily. Andre tracked Trevor's credit card usage, finding he'd checked into a hotel near Tempe. Cameron coordinated with contacts in various agencies, building a picture of Trevor's movements and plans. Jax stayed with Vanessa, teaching her basic motorcycle safety, talking through her options, helping her process 4 years of accumulated trauma from the relationship. They talked late into the desert nights, sitting by the fire pit under the vast Arizona sky, sharing stories about their lives before everything went wrong. She learned about Danny, about Jax's parents who died when he was 19, about how the Desert Riders had become the family he'd chosen. He learned about Vanessa's childhood in Tucson, her dreams of becoming a teacher, how Trevor had systematically isolated her from everyone she loved until his world was the only world that existed. Something shifted between them during those conversations, a connection that went beyond protector and protected. They were two damaged people learning to trust again, carefully and cautiously, testing whether it was safe to care. On the 10th day, Trevor Sutton made his move. Daniel Brooks called Jax at 6 in the morning, voice tight. He's at the Cactus Stop. Showed up when we opened, demanding to see security footage. My employee called me. I called the cops, but I thought you should know. On my way. Jax, Preacher, Cameron, and 4 other Desert Riders rolled up to the Cactus Stop 20 minutes later, a wall of leather and chrome. Trevor's rental car was still in the lot, and through the window they could see him arguing with a police officer. "Let me handle this," Preacher said, dismounting. "Everyone else stay ready, but stay calm. We're here as observers, not participants." Inside, the situation was tense. Trevor was insisting he had a right to see security footage because Vanessa was mentally unstable and he was concerned for her welfare. The Phoenix police officer, a weary-looking woman named Officer Patricia Reyes, was explaining that without a warrant he had no such right. "Sir, you need to leave the premises. The owner has asked you to go and you're now trespassing." "This is ridiculous. I'm trying to help someone I love by violating a restraining order." Officer Reyes pulled out her phone, showing documentation Margaret had filed. "Trevor Sutton, you have a restraining order from Flagstaff requiring you to stay 500 feet from Vanessa Coleman at all times. You violated it twice in Flagstaff, and now you're here in Phoenix actively searching for her, which constitutes stalking under Arizona law." Trevor's face flushed. "She's my girlfriend. She's confused, needs help. She's a grown woman who left you and filed legal documentation to keep you away. That's not confusion. That's a choice." Officer Reyes stepped closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Phoenix today. If I catch you within 50 miles of this area, I'm arresting you for stalking and restraining order violation. Do you understand?" "You can't." "I absolutely can. And if you'd like to test me, keep talking. I'd be happy to take you in right now." The standoff lasted another 30 seconds before Trevor turned and stormed out, nearly colliding with Preacher in the doorway. He pulled up short, taking in the patch, the other bikers visible through the window. "Friends of Vanessa's?" Trevor asked, voice dripping with contempt. "We're friends of people who need protecting from men like you," Preacher replied evenly. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. Vanessa and I have a relationship. Had. Past tense. She left you. Made her choice clear. Time for you to accept it and move on." Trevor's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment Jax thought he might actually swing at the 68-year-old man. But Trevor was smart enough to recognize he was outnumbered and outmatched. "This isn't over," he said, the threat clear. "Yeah, it is," Jax said, stepping forward, "because if you come near Vanessa again, if you so much as drive through this county, you'll answer to all of us. And brother, we're not as bound by legal niceties as Officer Reyes here." It was a line that probably crossed into threat territory, but Jax didn't care. He was tired of watching predators like Trevor terrorize women and get away with it because they knew how to work the system. Trevor looked at each of them in turn, calculating. Then he got in his car and drove away, tires squealing on the asphalt. Officer Reyes stepped out, shaking her head. "I appreciate the backup, but you boys need to be careful about making threats." "Wasn't a threat," Preacher said mildly. "Just information. We look out for our community. He's a threat to our community. The math is simple." "Uh-huh." But Officer Reyes was smiling slightly. "Well, for what it's worth, I've seen guys like him before. The restraining order and the warning might slow him down, but it probably won't stop him. Your friend needs to stay vigilant. She's got plenty of people watching her back," Jax assured her. Back at the clubhouse, Vanessa listened to the account of the morning's confrontation with mixed emotions. Relief that Trevor had been confronted and warned, terror that he now knew she had people protecting her, which might only make him angrier. "What if he comes back?" she asked. "Then we deal with it," Jax said. "But Vanessa, you heard what Officer Reyes said. You've got legal protection now, documentation, witnesses. Trevor's not operating in the shadows anymore. Every move he makes is watched. He won't just give up. Probably not. But eventually, he'll realize the cost of pursuing you is higher than his ego can afford." Preacher sat down across from her. "Men like him thrive on power and control. You've taken that away by refusing to be isolated and afraid. That's already a victory." Over the next 2 weeks, an uneasy calm settled. Trevor checked out of his Tempe hotel and, according to Andre's monitoring, returned to Flagstaff. Vanessa cautiously resumed working at the Sunrise Diner, though one of the desert riders was always nearby, sitting at the counter, nursing coffee, parked in the lot, visible and protective. Helen gave her a raise and better shifts. Margaret Preston helped her file for a legal name change and start the process of completely severing ties with her old life. Daniel Brooks became a regular fixture, his weathered face and quiet presence a constant reminder that people were watching out for her. And Jax became something more. It happened gradually, neither of them quite sure when protection shifted into affection, when guardianship became partnership. There were small moments, his hand steadying hers when she practiced riding his bike in the empty lot behind his shop. Her laugh when he told stories about Danny's terrible jokes. The comfortable silence they shared during long rides through the desert. One evening, 6 weeks after Trevor's confrontation at the Cactus Stop, Jax and Vanessa sat on the roof of the clubhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The temperature had finally dropped below 100 degrees, signaling summer's slow retreat. "I've been thinking about going back to school," Vanessa said quietly. "Finishing my teaching degree. It's what I wanted before Trevor convinced me I wasn't smart enough." "You'd be a great teacher," Jack said. "Think so?" "I know so. You've got patience, kindness, and you don't give up even when things get hard. That's what teaching takes." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then, "Thank you for everything, for fixing my car, for protecting me, for reminding me I'm more than what Trevor said I was." "You never needed reminding." You just needed someone to stop lying to you long enough that you could hear the truth again. She looked at him, at this guarded man who'd opened up his life to help a stranger, who'd taught her that not all men demanded and controlled, that some actually meant it when they said they wanted to help. Jax, She paused, unsure how to continue. He waited, patient as always. I care about you. More than I should, probably, given everything that's happened. I don't know if I'm ready for anything serious, and I don't want to complicate things, but I needed you to know. Jax smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I care about you too, have for a while now, and we don't have to rush anything or figure it all out tonight. We've got time. Do we? What if Trevor comes back? Then we deal with it, together. That's what we do. The Arizona sky deepened to purple, then black, stars emerging like pinpricks in dark fabric. Below them, the clubhouse glowed with lights and life, the desert riders going about their evening routines. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and another answered. Vanessa leaned her head on Jax's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Not just physically safe, but safe in the deeper sense. Safe to be herself, safe to make choices, safe to imagine a future that didn't involve fear. Thank you, she whispered again. Always, Jax replied. 3 months later, Vanessa Coleman, now legally Vanessa Morrison, having reclaimed her mother's maiden name, enrolled in online classes through Arizona State University to complete her teaching degree. She moved into a small apartment in Mesa, one with good security and proximity to the Desert Riders Clubhouse. Helen promoted her to assistant manager at the Sunrise Diner, a position that came with better pay and health insurance. Trevor Sutton never returned to Phoenix. Officer Patricia Reyes kept the restraining order active and flagged in the system, ensuring that any violation would trigger immediate response. Margaret Preston checked in monthly, maintaining the safety network that had formed around Vanessa. Daniel Brooks became a regular at the diner, his quiet vigilance a comfort. He and Vanessa developed an easy friendship, and one day she confided that he reminded her of the father she'd lost to cancer 10 years ago. Daniel's eyes had grown damp at that, thinking of his own daughter and the second chances life sometimes offered. The Desert Riders adopted Vanessa into their extended family, teaching her to ride her own motorcycle, a used Honda Shadow that Jax restored for her birthday. She attended club events, helped organize charity rides, and slowly built the kind of community connections Trevor had stolen from her. And Jax learned to let someone in again. It was terrifying and difficult, full of moments where old fears rose up and tried to convince him that caring meant eventual loss. But Vanessa was patient with him, understanding that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds took time to close. They took it slow. Coffee dates that turned into dinner dates, rides through the desert that turned into weekend trips, conversations that turned into plans for a future neither had thought they'd want again. 6 months after that first broken-down car in the Cactus Stop parking lot, they were partners in the truest sense. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to build something in the light. 1 year to the day after Jax first stopped to help Vanessa, the Desert Riders held their annual charity ride for veterans. 200 motorcycles roared through the Arizona desert, raising $50,000 for the local veterans shelter. Vanessa rode her Honda Shadow beside Jax's Harley, leather vest bearing a new patch, Desert Riders Family. At the end of the ride, back at the clubhouse with the fire pit blazing and brothers sharing stories, Preacher raised his beer in a toast. To the code, we protect people who need protecting, we help people who need helping, and we never, ever leave anyone stranded on the road. To the code, the club echoed. Jax looked at Vanessa across the fire, her face lit by flames, her smile genuine and unguarded. She caught his eye and mouthed, "Thank you," and he shook his head. mouthing back, "No, thank you." Because the truth was, she'd saved him as much as he'd saved her. She'd reminded him that opening your heart to someone wasn't weakness, that trust could be rebuilt, that love didn't have to end in loss. Sometimes it ended in partnership, in building something stronger together than either could build alone. The desert night stretched overhead, vast and star-filled, holding them all in its ancient embrace. Somewhere out there, Trevor Sutton was living his life, hopefully learning that some people couldn't be controlled or possessed. Somewhere out there, other women were running from other dangers, needing help they didn't know how to ask for. But here now, around this fire with these people, Vanessa Morrison was safe. She was seen, she was valued, and she was free. The code demanded nothing less.